from then until now, I have been on that path of servant leadership. I came back and got my MBA from Marquette. Um, I got a full ride as part of a Trinity Fellowship program. So it was an MBA with a focus in urban leadership. And since then, I've been leading nonprofit organizations, mostly helping first generation low income students get to and through college, because that was my story. I wanted to help other people who were just like me. And I did that for about 20 years. I ran some of the largest nonprofits nationally and locally. I led the Posse Foundation, which is a national organization, and most recently Chicago Scholars, before I came to Loyola. And then I had an epiphany, right? I had an epiphany. I had always said we are preparing young people to change the world. And we do that through education. I believe that education is a great equalizer. Education played a great role in my life to help change the trajectory for me and my family. So I've been preparing young people for the world, but in reality, we must prepare the world for these young people. We must prepare institutions like Loyola, companies like Deloitte, city infrastructures to welcome first generation low income students, people from marginalized backgrounds. I think they're ready. And so I give this analogy of rowing a boat, right? If we're rowing a boat, by focusing only on students and marginalized populations, Black people, brown people, LGBTQAI, if we only focus there, that's the equivalent of rowing with one oar, right? Do this, don't do that. What happens when you row a boat with one oar? You go in circles, right? You go in circles. And so if we really want to see change, if we really want this boat to move from here to here, we must row with two oars. And the equivalent of rowing that second oar is changing systems and structures, so that when those young people, when marginalized communities in general enter into places like Loyola, it's open and welcoming, inclusive, and inviting for them to live up to their greatest potential. And so that's how I got here. That's why I'm here. I've taken a shift to say, I want to have more impact. How do I have greater impact? And as I saw it, I could work with young people for the rest of my life, but will I really have the ability to create the change that I want to see? And I think Loyola is a perfect place to begin creating that change. When I got notice of this role, I got excited because it included some of everything that I love: higher education, entrepreneurship, building, and change management. I like a good challenge, and so that's what it is here. So I want to take a moment to share really some emerging thoughts on the vision for the Office of Institutional Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I want to invite you all to think through one major question as you listen to me talk about this work. I would love your feedback on what does equity and inclusion look like in practice? What is the observable behavior? How do you know that it exists, right? That's the question that I come to this campus with, come to this work with, is what does it look like? We can talk about the words, but what's the observable behaviors? What's the observable practices? And I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. And I want you to jot down some notes. And I want you to pay attention to whether or not I cover it or not, because this is the first time me articulating this out loud. And disclaimer, it will change and evolve over time. I'm just celebrating 5 months with Loyola as the Vice President of Institutional Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This is a new office. This is an inaugural role. And really, it's not a reflection of diversity not happening here. What it is, it's the role is set to set a North Star, a common goal, and a common vision for Loyola. There's a lot of amazing work happening on the ground, and I've had a chance to see and hear about that great work over the last 5 months. And so my role is to figure out, how do we institutionalize this work? How do we make it more permanent? That's not dependent upon individuals, if you will. How do we ensure that everyone who walks on our campus feels a sense of belonging? How can my office help us to become who we are, to become an embodiment of our Jesuit values? That's how I see this work. So with that, keep those questions in mind. this is what I set out in my, if you've had me come to any of your meetings, this slide probably is familiar. You know, everyone kept saying, what's your vision for diversity, equity, and inclusion? And I jokingly laughed and I said, let me pull it out of my back pocket. Now, I didn't come here with a vision. I really wanted to take time to listen and understand. And this is how I wanted to spend my first 6 months, is becoming a member of this community, understanding the long-term and short-term needs and desires, really clarifying what the role of the office is, what the priorities are, understanding really through a landscape assessment, where are we strong, where is there opportunity for growth, and then starting to socialize that with key communities. And I consider this session here as an opportunity to socialize what it is that I've found during this time. But I always said, if I came here with a vision, you should be concerned. But I am proud and excited that we do have an emerging vision that I'd love to get your feedback on as we move ahead. So here's what I'm going to share, and where I'd love for some engagement. So I believe in starting with a high level approach. Why does this work matter? What is the work? And then how will we do the work? What is our approach to the work? So we'll start with why, narrow into the what, and then the how. And then I'll end with a little bit about our team structure, our office, where some initiatives live, and where perhaps they don't live, and then share some really specific feedback on a set of roundtable discussions that we had that many of you participated in. So I wanted to give you a sneak peek at what some of those themes were. So with that being said, I want to pause here for some engagement and start with why. I think it's important to explore a larger context, right? And articulate a compelling reason why this work matters before jumping into tactics and strategies. And so before I share several whys, I'd love to ask you that question. Why would Loyola invest in this role? Why is this work important? And I love Simon Sinek and his TED Talk and book. If you haven't read it, it says start with why. And I think it's important that we start with why, because if it's not compelling enough, when it gets hard, we'll quit. If it gets hard, if it gets difficult, if we don't understand why we're going through challenges, we'll just quit. That goes from everything from strategy to a diet. If I'm just trying to get in a cute little dress, right, I just buy the bigger dress, right? And if my doctor tells me that, you know, I may have some health concerns, on the other hand, that's a more compelling why to help me keep me on my diet. So I'm going to pause there to see if you can come off mute or put it in the chat. Why does this work matter? And then I'll go back and share. Julia says it impacts people's perceptions and connections to Loyola and its brand. Absolutely. Thank you, Julia. Anybody else? Why does this work matter? Claire says, because our students have diverse backgrounds and our students are the first people we're responsible to. I love that. Absolutely. One more. Somebody, Heba says that universities weren't built with PLC in mind. I agree with that. I agree with that. So we have to kind of rejigger what the systems and practices are to reflect the changing demographic. Riley says that representation matters. Absolutely. Thank you for engaging. There may be some other things, and again, jot them down. I'll share with you a couple of things that I believe. First thing here is the world is changing, you know, and Hiba said it, right? Universities were created when we were more of a homogenous society. We are living in the most multicultural generation of our time, right? And there's, I don't know if you all saw this from the National Geographic, they said this is the face of the future. Most people are indicating multiple races for the first time in a long time. And that spiked, right? That spiked. It was for the first time in 2000, 6.8 million people checked more than one race. And then that already spiked by 32% by 2010. We are growingly multicultural. And I think just Also, this Generation Z, I have a 13-year-old daughter who keeps me on my toes. She is also a part of that Generation Z. They're very different. They have some characteristics that I think are pushing us to change, and I welcome it. It embraces diversity. They're globally minded. They are racially and ethnically diverse, and diversity is just a part of their norm. They don't live this binary lifestyle, and so they're open and they require inclusion. They're also activists, right? They stand up for what they believe in, and they only want to be affiliated with institutions that do the same, that reflect their values, whether it's a place to work or go to school or give their money to. And they're challengers of the status quo and conventions, right? They don't believe in this binary world. They want to challenge the status quo, and they just have fluid ideas around their identity as they're defining who they want to be in the world. And I think that's beautiful. I think that is going to pave the way. That change in demographic is going to pave the way for the change that we hope to see in this work and beyond this work. So the world is changing. I think very specifically for the landscape of higher education, there is something called the demographic cliff that many folks in enrollment roles across the country are looking at. As a result of the recession of 2008, the number of college-age students is shrinking, right? There's a shrinking pool. Many people stopped having babies, right, because of financial instability. Just about 17 years ago, almost 17 years ago. And so by 2025, there's a decline in traditional college age students. And so there's going to be a fight for those students and where they go. I think if you intersect that with COVID and this digital age, the traditional college experience is also, I think, in question, right? So we're fighting over this college age demographic, but after being on Zoom for 2 years, I think many young people are questioning, do I need to even be on a college campus to experience college? I'll add one last piece around the shrinking group is tech companies like Google are trying to disrupt higher education by offering certificate programs, right? With, in exchange, a high salary for 6 months of a certificate program. And so I think that there's going to be some need for us to differentiate the what and the why of higher education in the future. And then overall, there's a race for talent. And maybe the pandemic helped with this, but talent is at a premium right now. I think between everything else that I just shared about the changing demographics and the values that people are looking for, it's a premium. In order for people to not only come here to work, but to stay here to work, we have to reflect the values that they hold from staff and faculty alike, but certainly for students who are the primary demographic that we're serving. So diversity is at the center of all of that. People want to come to a place where they can be their authentic self and see those values in action. So those are a couple of things that I think about in terms of why this work matters. As a business, as an institution, we have to pay attention to what's around the corner so that we can stay competitive. So what is the work? What will the work be? What are the key areas of focus and priorities of our office? And again, my disclaimer is some of this will be smoothed around the edges soon. But here's how I see it. I see our work as creating a culture of belonging and connectedness for everyone who hits this campus, but especially for those who hold marginalized identities. I see this work as aligning our daily practices with our social justice mission. We can't just say we care for the whole person, right? What does that mean in real life? What does that mean when you're enrolling? What does that mean when you're up for promotion? What does that mean when you have a grievance? How do we align our daily practices with our mission? And how do we activate those values, again, same concept, into observable practices and behaviors? And so some of that is around policy and practice. That's the permanence of this work that I'm interested in uplifting as well. So there's 4 main areas that I think about, and I want to, we can double click on each of them, but I want to just lay out high level, right, of the work. So somebody said, I think it was Arlie in the chat, who said that representation matters, and it does. I think that's a big part of the work, is increasing the number of marginalized populations on campus, right? And that population is more than just race, right? We talk about gender diversity, LGBTQAI, disability, accessibility, religious diversity. We did a roundtable discussions, and I wanted to unpack diversity because it's way more nuanced than just race and ethnicity. And so representation matters at every level, but in many different ways beyond race. And so being very intentional in measuring and monitoring what that level of diversity looks like as we target new talent to come into the space. Once we get them here, we need to keep them here, right? So focusing on culture and climate to retain students, faculty, and staff. And that may show up, how do we retain folks when they do get here? It may show up by way of affinity groups, some capacity building, training, courageous conversations. There's a lot of different ways that retention comes up. Seeing ourselves in the curriculum, in the pedagogy, in the classrooms as students, and so helping those things to come to life. Reputation. This is something that you all mentioned in the chat as well. Like, we have to manage the reputation and brand of this place, especially as it gets more competitive. And so I see this work as amplifying the reputation of Loyola as a leader in DEI work locally and nationally. And so that work could include, events and podcasts, awards, fellowships, all of that. I think this is part of where I see Dr. Henfield's work with the Institute for Racial Justice as well, as he's building out a strong community academic arm with fellowships as well. I think that adds to the reputational value of the work as well. And then the last area is around responsibility. Because I like alliteration, it needed to start with an R, but that's really accountability, right? It's accountability and it's continuous improvement. So we could do all of the, heart to mind work of training people to care about others and to care for the whole person, but real change happens when we change systems, policies, and practices. We have to ensure that that is embedded in the work so that when I leave, when other leaders leave, the work lives on. And so how do we get that embedded so that that's just how we do business at Loyola? And so some of that work is around our annual reflection process, impact reporting, and clearly some policy and practice changes adopted as a university. And then lastly, how will we get the work done? What's our approach? What's our theory of change as we think about this work? I think a couple of things. This is by no means all inclusive, but this will give you a sense of how I'm thinking about it. I know that a leadership commitment is critical. Getting that buy-in from the beginning, getting that support from the beginning, and co-creating with leadership is going to be critical as we elevate a strategy. And I've already started that work with the president's cabinet and the deans. And I've been really pleased at the level of engagement and support that I've gotten so far. And so when that leadership is on board, it helps to ensure that change happens across the institution. Communities of practice are going to be critical. Right now, there's lots of communities of work, there's lots of bubbles of work, but we're not all coming together. And so part of this work is about convening those key leaders and committees across campus, gaining some alignment, sharing best practices, coming together, and then going back out to execute on the work so that there is a shared experience across stakeholders across all three campuses domestically. This work it needs to be human-centered. It's human-centered work. It's my general philosophy is people over everything. It's people. This is people work. We cannot lose sight of that. This is about people and how they experience this. So I want to be informed by people. And so one of the things that I'd like to do is to create a student advisory board that is solely focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion and can speak for multiple organizations. I'd like to repurpose the Executive Council for Diversity and Inclusion and the ARI Advisory Board to, again, represent all aspects of faculty, staff, students across the the organization so that we are ensuring that all of our potential actions and policy changes are vetted and that every stakeholder is included and reflected in some of those changes. And then lastly, a strengths-based approach. It's not lost on me that not everybody is supportive of DEI work. And I can't focus on those disruptors or naysayers. My strategy is to focus on those who want to do the work and celebrate that work. So my focus and our focus will be to engage with those who are excited to do the work and really celebrate wins across this community and use the power of positive peer pressure to continue to elevate the work. And so there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work being done. And there's my goal is to communicate that work so that people can see it, get excited about it, and replicate it. And so our work, our strategy, our style, and how we will engage is through as coaches, as consultants, as capacity builders for those who are doing the work in a way that connects with leadership. So the last couple of slides are our team structure. I know I've had a lot of people ask, where does the ARI, the Anti-Racism Initiative fit? Where's IRJ? How are we thinking about the work? And so I wanted to just share just a simple slide. I'm honored that Amy Nelson Christensen is now a part of my team, right? And that work falls under the Office of Institutional Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And when I think about the work of our office, I think about it with the framework of READY, is what I've been casually calling READY. And READY is an umbrella that includes racial justice, equity, anti-racism, diversity, and inclusive excellence. And so because this is an Office of Institutional DEI, this should cover all aspects of diversity work. Not that all of those things will report to me, but I should be aware of all of that so we can amplify it and communicate it so that people can know what that brand position is and what it is that we're doing on the ground. And so all of that should be reflected in our mission, vision, programs, practices, but honored that the Anti-Racism Initiative and Amy's work will be falling under my office. And then what's next? So what we just finished was roundtable discussions. I wanted to come in. It was clear. People said, we don't want to listen. We've already talked as much as we can. We don't want another listening session. And I 100% agree with that. I wanted to jump in and get to work. And so we set up roundtable discussions to really focus on action, to really unpack one aspect of diversity, and then validate what the issues and concerns were, and then really pivot to what potential solutions could be. And so we had a great session, actually 12 sessions, 6 different topics. These were the areas of reflection: disability, accessibility, race and ethnicity, gender, LGBTQIA+, religion, and diversity in the classroom. There were a couple of themes that emerged as people thought about actions. Learning and development was a big one. They wanted to figure out how to learn more, how to continue to grow on this journey of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's certainly part of the future work of our office. They wanted more convenings like this to just talk about the work, discussion forums. How do we engage with communities that are different than we are? And we've started doing some of that by way of the Loyola Project. We've been asking people to watch the film and start the conversation internally, to begin a conversation about racial justice, not just in the world, but on our campus. And those conversations have been really powerful. People want to get together with their people, with their communities, right? They want to convene with people who share an identity that they do and passions that they do. And so that will be part of our work. We've heard that loud and clear, especially amongst staff. They need resources. They want us to be a convener of resources, and sharing whether those are books or trainings, definitions, but resource sharing, and that will be a part of our work. Centralized and effective communication. Again, everybody's doing great work, but nobody knows about it. So we're going to help to centralize messaging around that. And then ultimately systems change. We don't want to just talk about it. We want to see actual change. And so there's a couple of thoughts and ideas around actual systems and policy change. And then as a result of the plan for action, roundtable discussions, these were some specific suggestions that we support and we're putting on our purview. A courageous conversation series is something that we plan to do. DEI dictionary, just defining terms of what do we mean when we say diversity? What do we mean when we say equity? What do we mean when we say a microaggression? Creation of affinity groups. That's something, again, that came loud and clear. Creation of communities of practice. A DEI calendar, that was something that was interesting, but something that reflects religious holidays, practices that may impact what happens in the cafeteria, what happens in the classroom, honoring the differences of folks when they perhaps won't show up because of their identity. So really thinking about that holistically. A student advisory board, I mentioned repurposing some of the existing advisory boards. There's some inclusive language that we want to propose for the syllabus for each professor, faculty member. Whether they use it or not is a personal choice, but wanting to share that resource for those who embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then just a centralized resource page. So that's what we have committed to. This is the emerging thought and vision around the work. And I want to pause, and I'm going to stop sharing, and I want to remind us of the question, and I'm going to start taking notes and questions, is what does diversity, equity, and inclusion look like in practice? What is the observable behavior? What needs to be true? What needs to exist in order for you to feel seen, heard, accepted, and a sense of belonging when you hit this campus? Thank you.
Thanks, Dominique. I just want to encourage folks, you can use the chat to put your thoughts to those questions, or you can unmute yourself and jump into the conversation. Don't be shy, everybody's welcome.
This is Julius Rhodes. I'm a 1987 graduate of Loyola University's Institute of Human Resources and Industrial Relations, which is now part of the School of Business. I also did my PhD work there in philosophy and business ethics. I guess, for me, it looks like different things to different people, but specifically, it looks like some of the things, Dominique, that you shared, which are creating opportunities for communities to come together, various communities to come together and share their ideas and allow people to participate in events of significance that broaden our perspective, our awareness, and our ability to engage in activities that might be outside of our normally accepted realm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, let me just say hello, Julius. Julius is such a supporter in the Chicago space. Julius and I are both part of another great community in Leadership Greater Chicago. We go way back. I did not know that you had this Loyola connection. So good to see your face, Julius. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts? You could share what it looks like or any pieces of my presentation that either resonated or had a question about. What resonated most or what left you feeling with a question mark?
I think a comment is how I would characterize this. I'm becoming increasing, I'm Carol Scheidenhelm, and I'm retired from Loyola. I still consider myself part of the community because I keep getting these invitations. I had an office across the hall from David and Teresa from Curl. I was the director of the Faculty Center for Ignatian Pedagogy at Loyola for 12 years. And I think that the influences of being at Loyola have made me a lot more aware of the growing inequities and the growing misunderstandings and the growing misinformation that plagues our country and indeed the world right now. If you look at the example of Hungary, they're struggling with keeping a democracy going there. And I guess what I see is the importance of your unit, Dominique, is that we need educated people who can continue to pass this understanding and awareness on to others, to expand people's understanding of otherness and to experience otherness. And we seem to have such a large portion of our population that is closed to this idea. And it's terrifying to me, to be completely honest. And I'm really, really glad to see that Loyola is really dedicating new resources to raising this awareness among our students, and hopefully they can go out to the community then and continue to raise awareness of otherness and the advantages of having diversity in our culture.
Thank you for those thoughts, Carol. You know, one of the things that your comment sparks, it's a comment and a question. I think of the work as very synonymous with our mission. And one of the things that I am hopeful of is that we can talk about this interchangeably with our social justice mission. When we think about our values of cura personalis and care for the whole person and for and with others, right? I feel like it's one and the same. And what I want to be really thoughtful about is not making it something extra, something that people have to do on top of the mission work, because I do see it as mission work in action. And so what I don't want it to become is politicized in the way that CRT is becoming politicized, right? So when I say DEI or diversity work, I don't want that to, you know, again, turn people off, because it is mission work. And so I don't know if anybody has thoughts there. I know I had a really great conversation with Tavis, who is a faculty member here, and he had some compelling thoughts around that too. But I think we're on the same page there. But if there's any thoughts or comments, I see Dana, I see your hand, around how we ensure that this is ingrained into just the ethos of the work, without it being another thing. Dana, did you want to share?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can everybody hear me well? Okay. So I'll introduce myself. I am Dr. Dana Harmon. I am faculty in the School of Social Work, but I'm also a 97 graduate of Loyola from our social work program, our MSW program. This past weekend or a few days, I was at the Faculty Women of Color in the Academy conference. And it was the most powerful, impactful conference I have ever been to, including conferences I've been to in my discipline. And I say that because of being in a space with only women of color. As we said, you know, look at all the melanin in the room. And it provided a sense of unity. Well, they said community, with unity in caps, encouragement, inspiration, sisterhood, you know, everything. And from that, as it relates to majority of us are at predominantly white institutions, and I do have a love for Loyola as a graduate. And the issue of DEI came up in various workshops and spaces that I was in, and it was pretty much the majority of us felt, oh yeah, look at our institutions hopping on the bandwagon about DEI and wanting us to be at the table, but you never asked us to be at the table before, really, that we were kind of silent partners. And in addition to that is, again, adding another burden on us as women of color to kind of take the lead of DEI work. And we already have the burdens of being women of color in society. And I mean, a lot of the women were Black women primarily. And so, of course, you know, just talking about issues that Black women face. So, you know, I've been processing a lot about that conference, because there were so many things to it. But I think there needs to be some intentional process about, you know, how much involvement and I don't like the term BIPOC. I don't know what that means. People of color kind of gives me chills and makes me feel uncomfortable. But I think at Loyola, we have to be very careful to reach out from my perspective. And like I say, being in this room with nothing but women of color, about expecting us and asking us to be a part of something of change, right? And I'm a social worker. I'm all about change agent. I'm all about social justice. I'm all about that life, but I'm also a Black woman. And, you know, I have to deal with many things of being at a predominantly white institution, and to be expected and asked, or if I sound, you know, kind of frustrated, I'm not angry, which is the stereotypes too, needs to really be paid attention to, you know, in terms of how much work should we be involved in this. And I would just say it, I need to see more white people at Loyola be in the forefront. If you're going to have a DEI committee, lead it. If you're going to be on other committees, voice, you know, and I'll say this, wrap up. Some of the women also said what frustrates them is they hear from their white colleagues after the fact. You know, they don't speak up and show quote unquote allyship in that moment. And that is frustrating and disconcerting and hurtful and all those things. So I think also those that don't have, you know, what we call melanin, so to speak, we need to see you all more in the forefront. And I really need to see that as faculty and a proud alum of Loyola, because Loyola has not really reached out to me as a Black alum in 25 years since I've graduated. And that's very problematic. Right. So I just wanted to, and I'm off camera because I'm double dutying different things and trying to catch up after the conference. Otherwise I'll be on camera. But thank you, everybody.
Dr. Harmon, thank you for your comments. I think that glimpse is real. As a Black woman, I definitely hear you. I was on a panel with Parkinson earlier this week, and you know, we talked about health and this intersection of racial justice and health, and you know, the Black tax is real, right? There is a cost of being Black in every space that you go that leads to weathering and stress and health issues just by being Black in America in these spaces, carrying that burden that is an invisible tax on us mentally and physically. And so definitely hear you. I saw Jill's hand and then I saw Betsy.
Thank you. My name is Jill Graham. I'm a emeritus professor from the School of Business. And one of the points that you raised that I related to very much was the idea of institutionalizing the practices and policies, so that if there's a champion or somebody who initiates a program or a policy, or in some cases a new program or even a course, that when they leave, that whole initiative doesn't disappear. As an example, while I was teaching in the business school, I initiated a service learning program, and you'll relate to this, Dominique. It was in management consulting, where our clients were those folks, various inner city neighborhoods who had a dream to start their own small business. It was called micro enterprise consulting. Was the course for very advanced MBA students and students about to graduate with their degrees, and we even included a few undergraduate seniors. And the whole idea was to train them in management consulting skills, and then team them up each with a client that was recommended to us from one of the neighborhood economic development organizations that was offering entrepreneurial training to folks that were aspiring entrepreneurs, or perhaps struggling entrepreneurs, somebody who'd gotten started but undercapitalized, didn't have a decent business plan, and so forth. Anyway, we did this for many years. But after I retired, I had done some succession planning myself, and somebody took it over after I retired. Yeah. But then unfortunately, after that gentleman moved on as well, there was not enough institutionalization of the program for it to continue indefinitely. and what effort is done in the business school now to involve students in such service learning has devolved in the, hey, is there some bright young tech entrepreneur out there that could go out and make a lot of money? And hey,
Yeah.
well, even the school could find some startup capital to, be a prize for the best business plan and so forth. And it's sort of like what the business students at Kellogg at Northwestern do, or down at Booth at the University of Chicago Business School. It emulates that. It's the straight business model. Forget service learning, forget social justice, forget that we're a Jesuit business school, where did the values go? So it's that sustainability of the, hey, wait a minute, we are, what our strategic difference is, that we can market and that matters to us. And that's what we're really here all about. And that, that derives this. How do we sustain that after, the initiator leaves the scene and so forth?
Yeah, Jill, you bring up a really good point, and I want to connect that to Dr. Harmon's point too, and actually circle back to one point that I made in the how slide. One of the first things that I put in the how was leadership commitment, right? This work has to live beyond me, and I have to get leadership, meaning the president's cabinet and deans, supportive of these initiatives as well. So it's not like, oh, that's just Dominique's idea, right? It has to be important to leadership, to the institution, and I have to be able to communicate and articulate the value add to someone who's in a different position than me. And so I'm very conscious of that as we're building, to say, how do we get that early on buy-in and support as we think about sustainability, and that this lives on beyond me. And I'm grateful for my management consulting experience and my Peace Corps experience, because sustainability was a key in all of that. If things go to heck, in a handbasket, after you leave a consulting and, gig, then you didn't do your job. Same thing as a Peace Corps volunteer. If things fall apart once you leave and go back to the United States, then you didn't do your job. So my eye is always pointed towards sustainability and institutionalizing practices. So thank you for elevating that. Betsy? Uh-oh, you muted again. One more time.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We're good. Okay, great. I teach in the fine arts department, and I'm part of our DEI committee in fine arts for the Department of Fine and Performing Arts. And we've had a lot of the same themes come up in our conversations that you've gone through. But then we also have really specific challenges, like students in theater and students in dance, and how can those spaces be more inclusive? So I'm curious, as we're moving forward, what plans does the OIDEI have to collaborate with these smaller satellite groups that are within the departments?
Yeah, great question. So one of the areas that you saw was building out communities of practice. I'm a small and mighty team right now. As I mentioned, Amy Nelson Christensen is one of the members of my team. The other member is Marshawn Brown, who is the executive director of diversity and inclusion. She used to report on the HR side, but is now on my team. And she will take on that community building piece. And so our vision, again, is to bring all of those key leaders together in an orchestrated way so that we can share best practices. Oftentimes we're just working in our own silos. And so bringing folks together, and when I say community of practice, it may be around something very specific, around recruiting more Black students, let's just say, for programs. Somebody is doing it really well in one area, we want them to share what they did with someone over in another school, so that you're not recreating the wheel. And so that doesn't happen organically or at all, from what I can tell right now, unless you have that personal relationship. So if we can facilitate some of those conversations, there's some folks who are doing really, really well on pipeline programs, right? From undergrad to graduate school. There's some folks who are doing really well on retention practices, really thinking about an area that is important to folks, and convening around that to share resources and best practices and capacity building. So soon to come. We're 5 months in, Betsy, so be patient with us. It is coming for sure. In the meantime, if you have thoughts, and this is for everybody, we do see ourselves as a resource to operate and support from a coaching and consulting perspective. So if you do have any strategic questions or need thoughts or guidance or just thought partnership around the work, feel free to reach out to our office now before we even launch some of those areas. We've had folks to do that, and it's been really meaningful. A lot of the deans who've done the racial justice examen, they did that reflection, they got their reports back, and then somehow, it stalled. And so some of them have reached out to say, well, can you help us keep it moving? And so we've had some really great sessions, some strategy sessions to help them, amplify and just kind of get that moving to action. So we're here for that as well. Thank you. And I see my sorority sister, Lasagna.
Good morning. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
Great. So I'm really enjoying this dialogue, this conversation, because the timeliness of this is really spot on. So I recently started a role with the California Primary Care Association. And by the way, I am a Loyola graduate, proud grad of the School of Education in the grad school from 2013. And this is my life's work. So the CPCA is actually a public healthcare conglomerate that works with all the other nationwide primary care associations. Illinois has one as well. That focuses on providing healthcare access to Black and Brown and other disenfranchised populations throughout the state. And the CEO here, who retired a couple of years ago, she made it her life's mission to exorcise the dominant culture within the organization to reflect the populations that we serve statewide. She said it makes no sense to inform this type of DEI work when we don't actually are not putting it into practice internally. So what she's done, not only did she start to bolster up the roster of folks in upper management as all the way down to admin to reflect the populations, but we also have leadership equity programs that focuses on the decision makers across all public health care facilities across the state, from CEOs to medical practitioners, you name it. They have a book club, a quarterly book club where everyone who wants to be a part of these cohorts can meet and go and they read particular books that are sent down from whoever leads or whatever on these types of issues. Even the new Jim Crow was the most recent book that they had to examine, and they offer their thoughts, their experiences. But I'm just kind of giving out kind of a collage of different things, how an organization, even someplace like Loyola, can really kind of start to be more engaging and really do things internally to kind of bring people together. I mean, we still do have quite a few, we do have a big collage of people. We have Blacks and whites and Latinos and Asian populations and everyone represented, and everyone feels like this is a safe environment. The hiring practices, they are part of their mission is it being an anti-racist organization. So within the application process, they have questionnaires that they require candidates to complete and write about their experiences about social justice and DEI and how they feel about anti-racism establishment as opposed to the status quo. But those are the kind of the systemic avenues that an organization or an institution can take to start to really kind of build out and process this culture organically, and rather than to not make it seem like it's done politically. By the rest, but it's more of how we massage and finesse. Right.
Absolutely.
You know,
I'm curious, with all of the things that you've seen, If you compare that to what I've shared as the areas of focus, kind of the what, the how, and the why, do you see any area of the gaps that we're missing that you would suggest as we are socializing this? This is, for me, that's the benefit, is to get some of that feedback. And so as you think through what I shared and what you've seen in your lived experience, where might we be, where might there be an area of opportunity or growth for us to fill in the gaps?
Honestly, I think you're really off to a really strong start. Having these conversations is really key. And I think what you don't want to find yourself into, though, is having the same people at the table.
You're right, a lot of familiar faces here.
Consistent faces, right?
Yes.
And considering that, Loyola is such a large institution compared to CPCA, because we're only based in Sacramento, it's a smaller office, and we have a network down in Los Angeles, but the state is really massive, right? So you do have, that's where the base kind of comes in, is the collection of different people as part of that network. I think it would really help Loyola to actually really engage that leadership equity capacity building brand. Because if you're not getting enough people who are the decision makers, and they're kind of like, well, yeah, you're right, Dominique, this is great what you're doing, but they're still siloing themselves from being immersed in the work that you're trying to do, then really it's fruitless for you, right? It becomes, it's much more laborious. So I think if there's a way to kind of bring them in and have them consistently be a part of the action, instead of them, you're coming to them and then you're giving your report and your summation, and then they give you their feedback, and then they're, okay, I'm going to go back into my office and close the door.
But you bring up a really good point, and I just, this may be a point of contention. I will share this, and I put it on there. It's that strengths-based approach, and people may not agree with it, but what I do know is that there will be people who are on all parts of the spectrum, right? When it comes to this work, there are going to be those that are really supportive and show up to sessions like this, like you all, and you are my people. You are the people that I want to work with. There's going to be other folks who are going to say, yes, great work, Dominique, and they're going to be passive resistors, right? And they will say that they're in it and perhaps do nothing, right? And then there will be vocal resistors, right? My thought and my strategy is to truly work with those who are supportive of the work. If I spend and turn my attention to those who are resisting on an active basis, on a regular basis, nothing gets done. And what a disservice it would be for those who show up to sessions like this. What a disservice, right? So I want to maximize the time, energy, effort, passion of those who are in it. And I think peer pressure is a powerful tool, right? Positive and otherwise. And so I want to continue to highlight mission moments. I want to hear from you all. If there's something working in your space and place, I want to take that as an opportunity to shout it out, whether it's a newsletter or social media or at the top of a meeting. That's one of my strategies, is say, let me share with you what's happening over in the School of Education and School of Social Work, the Faculty Council. Let me share with you what's happening. And when people see that, we did that with the with Athletics Department at the last cabinet meeting, and I could not have scripted it better, right? So I highlighted I had no idea that Steve Watson was leading so much amazing diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And we shared a quick video of all the work that they had been doing. And another one of the cabinet members said, oh, I need to take you out to lunch, right? To see what it is how you did all of this, because I want to learn from you. That is the goal, right? In that moment, that confirmed the strategy. That's what I want. I want to highlight and amplify the work. I want somebody to see it and wonder, how did you do that? Teach me how. And then collectively, we move the needle. And so I'm one person, I have a small team, and I want to work with those who want to work with me. So in the spirit of time, I have one last question for you all. And this is the one that I love the most, because we spend a lot of time talking about institutions and institution building, right? And Loyola is an institution. But what happens when we are part of institutions is that sometimes it feels bigger than us. It feels too big to change, right? We have all these departments and people and departments and silos. that we feel like we can't change it as one person. I'm just one person. What can I do? And so as an institution, we absolve ourselves of any personal responsibility at times. And I've been guilty. And I want to challenge that a little bit and say that institutions are built one decision at a time, one action at a time, one inaction at a time, one spoken word at a time, one silence at a time. We each create a system. We create inclusion, we create equity, we create the environment and experiences that those around us feel. And so as we think about that, I always like to ask the question, what is ours to do? What is mine to do as an individual member of this community? And so I want to ask you that, what's your personal commitment to this community? What could you do in the spirit of equity, inclusion, and diversity? And I'll give you one example, and it's a simple example that I use. Oftentimes people will send me job descriptions. And they say, we're looking for, somebody to fill this role and position. Can you send it to your network? Well, if I send it to my network is mostly Black. And I can send it to my network, and what you're going to get is mostly Black candidates, right? I'd imagine that most of our networks look like us, right? So if I'm not thoughtful and intentional, right, I'll continue to send that to my Black networks, and I won't diversify that pool. And so I now pause to say, how can I make sure that I send this out to the most diverse group of people that I can think of, right? So that this person can get a diverse set of candidates for their particular role. So that's just one micro action that I feel like I can do. So I just want to throw that back to you all, whether the chat or taking yourself off mute. What is yours to do? Any micro actions that you can take in the spirit of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Dominique, this
Yeah.
is Paul Davidovich, and I've been associated with the university for a long time. I used to run the graduate school of business. So I see Jill on there, and you had many, many good programs that we did with that course in 430 and a bunch of things like that. The one person I think that you should highlight and did a lot of things is Karen Fleshman. If you reached out to Karen Fleshman at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And she was the basis of a lot of things that are happening there.
Mm-hmm.
And if any of you people don't know who she is, you should get involved with her. I am the one who is her sponsor and basically mentor for the past 3 years to get everything going to the way it is. And the thing I want to highlight is people who come to do that. She came to me, she was one of my students from a long time ago. We fought the university for 3 years to get to this point. What you should highlight is a lot of the alumni that she's trying to do. I don't see any conversation with a lot of the alumni, and get those things out for the Black Light series that they're doing that I think brings a lot of people in, and a lot of that effort. And that's some of the important things. If we don't get the 100,000 alumni and they're involved in this also with the students who are basically the salespeople for this to bring in all the new students, that's what you need to do. Mm-hmm. So my contribution was just bringing Karen Fleshman when she asked me to help, and the people at Loyola that helped us bring this to this conclusion here. So you've got a lot of work ahead of you. Mm-hmm. I hope it goes well. If you need my help, let me know. I did Posse years ago, if you remember, probably before you, a gentleman named Ken Hunt.
Yeah,
he brought
absolutely.
me in a long time ago, and so I was involved with Posse and a bunch of other things. So we'll be in touch. But I just had to say a few words before I drop off. Good luck. I wish you all the best. You've got a great job to do, and hopefully we can move forward with this.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you for amplifying the work of the Black Alumni Board. They are phenomenal. I'm working really closely with advancement and alumni relations, very specifically. Lawrence Bulletin is doing some really phenomenal work. And I think when I think about this community, alumni are very much a part of it. And I think our Black Alumni Board have a critical role. I think of all alumni groups, they are probably the most advanced and the most engaged, thanks to Karen's leadership. So I will definitely be reaching out on a more consistent basis. Thank you, Paul. Any other thoughts around actions, micro actions, and things that you can do as we wrap up, or other questions?
I have both an answer to your question and a further question. So I was in the roundtable conversation around folks with disabilities, and that I think it was one of the first conversations. And we had talked a little bit about infrastructure and that investment. So my question, and I also am responsible for Curl's website, and I know there's a lot that we are like digitally not necessarily accessible at the level that we could be as a center, as the Loyola website writ large. So I'm kind of curious. So I know that I need to do my own education around that, about how to make it more accessible and all that sort of thing. But I'm wondering what kind of commitment has also been made on the university's part for resources. I know you said something about a resource page, but like to really invest in those kind of larger accessibility issues, so that we can do our best work.
Yeah, it's a great question. Here's what I gather. When a topic is elevated and brought to leadership, there's action, right? I think there's a challenge in the communication chain because there hasn't been a position like mine that reports into the president, right? To bring that level of visibility to the decision makers who have access to budgets and resources. And so I think just by mere fact of me being present and elevating that work and the needs, it will get some more time, attention, and resources. And so one of the things that we're doing, I just sent a note off to all of the co-hosts from the roundtable discussions yesterday. So we'll be following up and sharing out, here were the top suggestions. Are we missing anything? What do you need? How do we partner in the execution of this work, right? So it was strategic, not only to bring them together for the conversation, but to partner with them in the execution of the work. And so I can't do the work, they may do the work, right? So Betsy Burns, who leads, who led in that area, she'll be, leading. And so I'll be working with her on what it is that she needs and be the voice in that room to get the resources necessary. And so that's how I see my role, is being an advocate for those on the ground who may not have access to those rooms and resources. So if there's something, right, make sure it's on my radar. And everything that I've brought so far, I mean, I think there's some low-hanging fruit, if you will, that came out of that conversation just about doors and accessibility, that we were able to elevate as well. So it's about awareness. I hope that answered your question. I see Tavis, I see your hand.
Hi, Dominique. Morning. I'm not going to answer your question in a true academic fashion, but I'm going to make some suggestions for you. So I like the presentation that you gave. I like the direction that you were taking us and all of that. But my one comment is that we still don't know how these things interact with each other. And I want to challenge you to think of a way where you can put all the initiatives that you've talked about into a package that continues to bombard us across the university, so we know what DEI looks like, and we not only know the work and we know your name, but also we know the work of the different initiatives that you've talked about. And I think one of the challenges that I have seen so far is that you have things in different places and we don't know how they connect. So, you talked about the work that Malik Henfield is doing, but not many people is able to connect the work for the Institute for Racial Justice with initial DEI work, or connect the work with that Amy Christian Nelson and so forth is doing. And so I think part of it is that we still, and I think this is a good thing for you, is because things are still fragmented, that you can put your own unique spin in terms of how to package and sell it to us. And I would like to see that. I would like for you to come up with a packaging and selling that we are bombarded the same way, for example, with IES. Everybody knows IES. You can't miss it. There's enough things we get from them. And I think we need to do that. And the second thing I wanted to say, which I would absolutely love to see, and I was trying to find it now, but I can't find it, is that last week I stumbled upon a Northwestern University site. And I think it was their main homepage, but apparently their homepage has changed. But the entire homepage, for whatever reason, had, it was all about DEI. It was all about everything that Northwestern was doing on DEI. It was the central homepage. And then in addition to that, it had 6 different readings that you can read about, and these were just different things. So from the homepage, it was just all about Northwestern's position on DEI, and then there was a link that says, if you wanted to learn more, you can click more. Then you had these 6 different readings, and there were 6, and I've seen you use some of those readings. But for me, it was interesting that the DEI had become so important that it had made it to their front page, and so I wonder when we can say that we're so proactive with DEI. And again, not everybody's going to like it. Not everybody wants to do the work. I get that. But at what point in time can we have DEI on our homepage?
I love all of those suggestions. Thank you. I think you're right. So you're 3 steps ahead of us. We're working with UMC right now to figure out how to reconfigure our Office of Institutional DEI page to connect all of the ways that we work and intersect with other initiatives like IRJ, ARI, the work that Badia is doing, and all the other great work happening out there. So that is definitely something that's coming. So thank you for that. And I love the university's position on DEI and different readings on a primary page. Love all those ideas. So keep them coming. Dana, I see your hand.
Yes, related to that, those were very, very good points, Tavis. I was like, wow, that's great. The other thought that I have is what is happening with the racial justice examine data, so to speak. I mean, the university last academic year, I think, rushed and kind of forced and pushed academic units to do all of this work that I was a part of in the School of Social Work. And, we took time to try to meet all these, rush deadlines about something that's very important, but did the best that we could with the time that we had. And there was a lot of information that came out of that I thought was valuable. But now we're a year later and don't know what's happening, with that. And so I just want to know kind of what the university's position is about that, since they, they kind of made everybody do it. And I do appreciate Amy Nelson Christensen's leadership with that, and even currently since. The other, so that's the first point. The other comment or question that I have is what involvement and, kind of face forwarding are we going to see of deans? And this goes back to leadership of our deans and the provost office and the president's office and the board of trustees. I just think that, a lot of our leadership is just kind of hiding and kind of making their faculty, staff, and even students do all of this work. And if we're going to be this one Loyola and, all for one for all, and our strategic plan includes DEI, my question is, where y'all at in terms of leadership? So yeah, so those are a couple of things.
Let me answer your first one, and it's a great question. What happened to the racial justice exam? So I've made a proposal that I feel comfortable with. Love to get your feedback on it, but what we've seen and heard, right, from many is that we did it. It was rushed. We got the report back, and then things stalled and haven't moved from recommendation to action. Some deans have reached out proactively to say, coach us, consult us, help us move it forward. We've done that with at least 3 or 4 deans already. One of the things that I proposed to Provost Callahan was to create a series of days of planning and action days with the deans, right? To have groups of 3 to 5 of them per session to report out on their racial justice exam and recommendations, update us on what has happened, and then actually coach them collectively through how to move it to the next step, right? So there's, again, some best practice sharing, there's some experience sharing, and then there's an opportunity for us to collectively coach them through to a next step. And I think that's it's one step at a time. How do we get this moving? How do we take action on 1, 2, or more of the recommendations? And so she's agreed to that. We're going to try and make that happen before the end of the academic year. And we know it gets busy, but there is a commitment from Provost Callahan to help us advance that. I've had those conversations as well with Dr. Rooney about how do we then replicate that on the administrative side. And so there was a question of, do we continue with the racial justice examen moving forward? And my recommendation is that we build upon it and not to move it ahead in the way that it is currently. I think there were some inherent flaws in it, not just in the rollout and timing of it, but we want to create a tool that is applicable for both the administrative side and the academic side, so that we can all have that shared experience of reflection, getting that data and moving to action. And so we will have what I'm calling right now is a culture and climate examen, if you will. So repurposed a bit so that we all can experience that together starting in January. So we'll finish out with the racial justice examen over the next 6 months, move that to action. We'll come back in the fall, experience a bit of the changes in the climate in that first semester. And then in January of 2023 is when we plan to launch a new examen for both the academic and administrative side. We're getting close to time, but great questions. I love how committed you all are to this work. But if there are any other burning thoughts, questions, feel free.
Just for clarification, Dominique, will what's been done with our the racial justice examen, will people who were I know we had a committee in the School of Social Work, for example, will there be reach out to those that were kind of the leaders of that to have further conversations about what came from academic units? And then I know there were there were themes that Amy saw from all the reports. So I'm just wondering, what will the reach out look like to continue that dialogue? Because I am for moving towards solutions, but I think we also have to discuss and understand how we even got there and had some of the problems that came out. And that was the other thing that came up from that conference that I was at last week is, they're also hearing at their institutions is, well, how can we solve this? And they're like, well, wait a minute, we need to figure out why we have these problems, as opposed to just jumping, over to solving something without discussing how we got here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let's chat about it one-on-one. I think my first reaction to your question, Dana, is that your dean should be the person reaching out around uplifting that up again. And we are really reaching out to deans. We're working directly with deans and VPs on this work, right? As the leaders, to your point, like, what is it that they're doing? Well, that's how we're working. We're working through leadership commitment. They're either reaching out to us or we're reaching out to them to say what's happened. Let's continue the work. Let's make sure that it progresses, because here's the thing, especially when it comes to this work for me, what I fear is that all of this effort and investment has gone into the racial justice examen. If nothing happens from that process, right, the confidence level in any of the work that I'm going to uplift goes down, right? It's faded. And so I'm set up to fail if nothing happens with that racial justice examen. So I'm committed to making sure that there is some return on that investment of time, energy, and effort, right? So that anything else that we decide to do moving ahead, people feel a sense of confidence that something's really going to happen with this work. I didn't come here to just move papers around on a desk and perform activity. We really want to see some real change. So thank you for continuing to uplift it and keep doing that. Keep doing that. You know exactly how to reach me. So let's work in partnership to make sure that there is some movement. David, I see your hand.
Yeah, just, Dana's experience around this particular topic is one, unfortunately, that Loyola, and I think institutions, particularly institutions of higher ed, probably struggle with this universally. But we at Loyola, after 26 years here, I can say we at Loyola really do this, where we think something's a dialogue, but in fact, it's just an extraction of information. And I can speak much more, but won't here, about our experiences at Curl about that when it comes to financial matters or staffing or planning. It's sort of give us the information. We want to have a dialogue with you, but really what it is just kind of give us the numbers. And so I think there is the there is sort of this ethos of that you're going to have to, you know, really kind of remind folks that no, I'm serious. I want this to be not just where I'm taking something away from you, getting the facts and then never coming back, but that this is an iterative process. This is a conversation, a dialogue, and not just, and simply saying it's a dialogue is not enough. And related to that, I appreciate and recognizing that this is being recorded. I appreciate that you're working with the deans and upper administration. Love them all with my very being. I would suggest that we think through about what it means to work at the next level down and the next level down, not always through those particular leadership. I know we have to, and I this is not a critique, but just a reminder that much of the innovation in my years here, much of the innovation and change has come from a multitude of sources. Sometimes the aforementioned leadership level, but more often than not, it's individual people impassioned and feeling empowered to step forward, whether they're students, you know, individual faculty, staff, and just kind of making sure that it isn't only focused in on kind of turning to and expecting the deans or the VPs to be the ones to kind of get the word out, because as I said, that isn't always the way it has worked out. And I think I'm going to cut myself off before I say anything.
No, it's a great reminder, David. So I want to address that because you're right. Boots on the ground, the people I believe that who are closest to the work are the most poised to propose solutions, to actually roll up their sleeves to do the work. The reason why I have this piece around leadership commitment that's baked in there is because what I've seen so far is there's a lot of people who convene in committees, right? They got together, they made proposals, they made recommendations, and then out of the blue, VPs and deans were like met with a list of demands that they had no engagement in. Like, imagine being a leader and everyone has been doing all of this work without your thought, without your awareness, without your inclusion, and a list of demands come to your desk. I don't know if anybody likes to be told what to do without their voice in it, right? As a human being, we like to be included and brought along in that work. And so as much as I can, I am really encouraging that connection between those on the ground and including those leaders so that when those recommendations, not necessarily demands, right, come through, there's at least some awareness and buy-in, right? That way we're not wasting our time. And I've seen it happen already a couple of times where that list of demand comes and then there's pushback, right? And then we wasted a year. We wasted all this time because the right people were not brought to the table, namely leadership, who ultimately is responsible and accountable for implementing the work in a long-term, sustainable, institutionalized fashion. So it's a dance, but very important to work with all those stakeholders. We have 3 minutes left. Well, I see one last hand, Lasanya.
I'm not going to take up your time. I was just taking some notes based off of the last few minutes of conversation here. And I think Dana made some really great points that I definitely want to have a one-on-one dialogue with you, because I'm thinking maybe we can kind of examine department by department and see about what kind of networks that are happening out there in the field that's directly related within those departments to start building out that DEI plan, where, you know, you can get the deans at the table, but kind of present in a way that's universal. So we'll talk about that, you know, one-on-one, because I'm thinking, I'm thinking there's something that we can do that does not put weight on this faction here or that faction there, but kind of build it in organically throughout the process where it just becomes more natural in its formation. So let's talk about that, Dominique. So
I welcome that. Thank you. Mm-hmm. David, Teresa, any last thoughts?
Not from us. We just, other than say thank you. Anything you want to leave us with in particular?
Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody who took time out of their Friday morning to join. I think it speaks volumes to the quality of the community. It reinforces why I said yes to this role. It reinforces my confidence that because of this rich engagement that we just had, I am more than confident that we're going to see positive change in this work. And I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you all. I'll share my email address is djordanturner@luc.edu. You can find me, and I look forward to working with all of you. I want to invite you to invite me to your spaces if you want this kind of dialogue and conversation, and think about how it's related to your place and space. That's the work that I'm doing. And so I look forward to doing that and welcome you all to continue the dialogue in another manner. So thank you and have a great weekend.